Welcome to Industry Insights with Route Consultant, your front row seat to the fast-moving world of logistics and beyond. Each week, we bring you game-changing insights, real-world strategies, and fresh perspectives to fuel smarter investments and build stronger businesses. Join us as we sit down with expert guests to explore emerging trends and pressing topics across a wide range of industries. This is Industry Insights. Hey everyone, welcome to Industry Insights. This is a special episode that was actually recorded live at the Route Consultant Expo in 2026. We're releasing this over time so that if you weren't at the Expo, or if you missed the session, or if you're just catching up, these are all coming out over the course of the year so that you can go back and watch this content and make sure that you see everything that we went over at the Expo. Today, we're going to hear from Andrew Polito of GoHQ and me, Josh Gregory, about the true realities, costs, and profitability of the Amazon DSP space. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Expo Day 2. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you have gotten your coffee. I, again, have had at least 4 cups this morning, so I'm surviving. Hopefully you all are too, because we've got a lot of content left to go over today. So this morning, this session is really about something on the Amazon side that I feel like often kind of gets glossed over. We talk a lot about the advantages, like kind of the differences between FedEx and Amazon, but we don't always get into the real operational numbers of Amazon. So I really wanted to have a session where we dig into those and kind of give you some examples of what reality looks like, especially maybe if you're new and trying to come into the space for the first time. What do those first 6 months, first year look like? So we've brought Andrew here from what is your GoHQ? Yeah, yep. They changed their name recently. It's not my fault. Yeah. So if you want to kind of introduce yourself, talk a little bit about why you know about the Amazon space, then we can get into it.
Yeah, thanks Josh for having me. And so I've been working in this space now for going on 6 years. Started GoHQ in 2020, and then we launched our bookkeeping services in 2021. So my role as a CFO at GoHQ, if I didn't mention that, and so my team oversees bookkeeping services for hundreds of DSPs and FedEx contractors as well, but really we started in this Amazon space, and so we've seen its progression from the early days all the way through to what it is today, and then have a really good insight into like what the future looks like. And so that's my history here in this space.
Yeah, so it's not just their numbers, it's hundreds of other DSPs that they get to see. So I think it's a pretty broad swath and gives a lot of context there when we're talking about general themes. So I know probably one of the easiest ways to start is just a lot of these people are not Amazon contractors and are trying to think about, if I was to get into the space, what does that even look like? What's the process look like today? Because I know the way I talk about it might have changed some over the years too, because with Amazon, things like to change quickly. So what today is kind of the process of getting into Amazon?
Yeah, so it's different than in the FedEx space, as we know. There's not really the buying and selling of contracts and routes as like the same way that it is with FedEx or bread routes or whatnot. And so you apply with Amazon to join, to be a DSP. You go through a multi-interview process. Sometimes they even fly you up to Seattle. And then you get put on what's called a bench. And then the bench is really, you might get a call in 3 months that, hey, a DSP is ready for you, or in a year, and you have to be able and willing to basically drop what you're doing at that time and accept a contract with Amazon. It is location based too, so if you're very specific on I don't want to be anywhere outside of my home region, well, you're probably going to be more limited in what opportunities arise for you. But if you're willing to move cross country, relocate, you can probably get into the program quicker. One of the major changes right now going on is they're really investing in their rural and super rural program, is what it's called, where so that they can deliver. And we've helped stand up DSPs in the Texas Panhandle and the Dakotas. And so if you're willing to move there and start up a company, you can probably get into the program a lot faster. And that's been really where the opportunities have been. But yeah, you stand up and you're basically given, I believe, 1 or 2 weeks to accept the position. And if you don't accept it, they move on to the next person. You just continue to wait for the next opportunity. And then from there, it's about a 60-day to 90-day process to actually start the business.
Do you have any sense of like how long people will sit on the bench for on average or anything like that?
It's all different whenever you talk to certain people. Some people I know have got interviewed, got accepted, and within 3 months they had a DSP. Others we speak to, and they've been on the bench for 2 years, 3 years. But it does come down to like how selective they're being with the opportunity. And
yeah. So if you're in Atlanta and waiting on Atlanta, it might take a little bit longer than if you're in rural North Dakota. Yeah.
Right.
And we've seen that a lot. Obviously, just like what you're saying, Amazon has areas that they're really focused on filling, that if you can fit that niche, you can move a lot faster. Otherwise, it's going to take longer if you're just going to sit on the bench, because Amazon uses the bench to fill their needs. It's not as much about, wherever you want to go, they're going to fill it. It's more about what does Amazon need, and they're looking at the bench to see who fits those boxes, and they'll ask you if you want to adjust to fit one of those boxes and kind of move you from there.
That's right.
There are opportunities, I will say, to buy in the Amazon space. It's just there's not as many as there are in FedEx, for sure. It's not even close to as many. It's a much more difficult approval process, to say the least, I would say. So let's skip that whole approval side of things. You found a business, but what does it actually look like? You said you guys stand up a lot of DSPs and help them kind of get started. Mm-hmm. What does standing up look like? I know Amazon does some training, but what do they expect you to come in on day one with?
Yeah, it is you drink from the fire hose of information in those first few months, and usually you only know 60 days, 90 days out. And then through that process, you're given your ramp plan. You do have checklists of sorts of, hey, you need to get insurance, you need to have these boxes checked, and you kind of know when your stand-up date is and how many routes you're going to be required to commit to that week. And then they actually do give you an 8 to 12 week plan or a ramp plan for that, so you can kind of know what you need to meet to. And so, yeah, during those initial phases, you need to start hiring, you need to start training, all before you're getting paid also. So that's like one weird part is, while there's not, unless you buy, an existing Amazon DSP, while you don't have the large initial investment, you do need to have available capital, whether it be through lines of credit, whatnot, because you need to make deposits with your insurance, you need to source rental vans. Oftentimes, there's not leases available that Amazon does provide and pay you for, which we'll probably get into a little bit. But yeah, you need to make those deposits. You also need to start paying people for training and whatnot before you're getting paid. And so it's usually a few weeks out.
Yeah, so give me a little bit more in terms of, if it's a few weeks out and you're given a plan, like how much do you typically see that people need to float or have available as capital leading into those the beginning periods before they're getting paid?
Yeah, many are. If you have about $50,000 in capital available, that should get you that typically gets you more than what you need in terms of what you need to float. One nuance that people don't realize coming into Amazon is you're giving these route commitments, and they say you need to service 5 routes in week 1, 5 routes in week 2, step up to 10 routes in week 3, 15 routes week 4, so forth. There are opportunities to pick up more than that. So if you have more available cash and you can staff more people, get more vehicles, you can pick up that extra volume, and that does behoove you because it gets you to scale faster. You're not limited to that unless they don't have that volume, but typically what we see is they do, but they know that they can't require every new DSP to come in at 20 routes right off the bat.
So is it typically something like 10 routes that they start you out on to ramp you up? Is it something close to that?
It's about 5, yeah.
5?
Usually
Okay.
5, and then 10 by week 2 or 3, and then typically by week 8 you're up to where you're going to be at, which is typically around 25 to 30.
Okay, so beyond just having the capital ready, are there other things that you tell people to do even before stand up? Hiring, it sounds like, but what are the other things they need to put in place even before they've stood up on the business?
Yeah, it's very important. Very early on, as an owner, you can probably do most things in the business and do everything, but it's not going to scale with you very easily. Very quickly, you will get burnt out. So finding an effective leader to work alongside of you and give them the right incentives with scaling the business with you is really important. Some of the most successful DSPs we work with that scaled found that person that they can partner with that is essentially their BC, their operations manager. And then through the training process, identifying people who can be lead drivers, because you don't want to get into a situation where you have to be pulled away for something else. Your operations manager, you have nobody you can lean on early on, because it'll lead to a quick turnover early on, and it can really affect a lot down the road. And so that's one thing. Getting in contact with the right vendors. You're going to need rental vans. You're going to need repair shops. You're going to need a lot. So just finding those right vendors and kind of telling them, this is my plan. I want to be able to get these amount of vehicles. I'm going to need these at these stages, and establishing those relationships is very important as well.
So you brought it up, so let's jump ahead a little to it. But on the fleet side, so you're coming in. Can you walk through a little bit of what it looks like to operate a fleet with Amazon? Like, what do they do for you? And then explain why you would need a rental van.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and so Amazon will pays you for your fleet. So if you are committed 30 vehicles and they know that you need those 30 vehicles to run your route, every month at the beginning of every month they have what's called a fixed monthly payment, and depending on the type of van that you have, you get paid for that. Well, oftentimes those leases are not available early on, or even as you scale. So during peak, for instance, a DSP that runs 30 routes might be running 50 or 60. Rentals, DSPs are very reliant on rentals in their area, and so it becomes fairly competitive too among DSPs in the region. And so ensuring that you can get those rentals in order to support the volume is very important. And if you are told that your route commitments are now 55, if you can't meet those route commitments, Amazon has what's called a reliability score. That score is how much of your route commitments are you meeting, and are you reliable, and can you pick up the extra volume? That's a percentage. So if you're at 100%, it means you've met your route commitments generally 100% of the time. Very often in many of the stations we work in, that is, every DSP is at 120%. That's the bar that needs to be met. And if you don't have a good relationship with a vendor to be able to source vehicles when you need them, if you don't have a pipeline of drivers to keep moving through, and to be able to staff for extra opportunities, you'll get below that, and then they use that reliability score to give out extra volume in the future. So they'll, if volume grows in the station, the DSP with 120% reliability will get that extra volume over the DSP that's not meeting their reliability. And so anyway,
Yeah,
it's
I think that's a
important.
really interesting part of Amazon that is different than some of the others, where 100% is kind of the minimum. And if you're trying to get above or trying to grow, you have to be operating consistently above 100%. It's a weird kind of mindset shift, but it is very standard with Amazon.
Yeah.
So, one of the things you've touched on a little bit is that routes can vary some, and so trucks can vary some. Is that you're running 20 routes today and 25 tomorrow and 30 the next day, or how much variance is there day to day, or is it month to month or quarter to quarter? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's more seasonal and probably month to month. Like in general, during certain times of the year, you can expect to meet. It'll probably fluctuate 3 to 4 routes. On the weekends, you might run. If you're typically your average is 23, on the weekends you're probably running 19 or 20, and then middle of the week it might be closer to 25 or 26. So it does fluctuate within probably 5 to 6 during normal times of the year, and then during peak we usually see an increase of 25 to 50%. And one other nuance with Amazon is they offer what's called pop-ups. That is, hey, we have this station, it's 3 hours away from you, or do you want to stand up an operation for the next 4 months over there? And we'll pay you a little bit more, but you essentially have to stand up a brand new DSP for 4 months, staff it, send managers and whatnot. And so anyway, that will significantly increase. I talk to DSPs that triple when they get an opportunity like that, because their home station increased and now they have this new opportunity. So
Do you ever see people who do pop ups get to stay in those areas after the time period?
yeah, we do see that. Yeah, so sometimes Amazon has this program called the Pinnacle program. Most DSPs operate out of one station or terminal. That's a one-to-one, one-to-many relationship, I guess. So Amazon rolled out what's called the Pinnacle program, so high-performing DSPs have the ability to scale their business and add extra locations. So that becomes a permanent location. So now that's another application process, but you need to have a proven track record of performance in order to do that, and meeting reliability and your safety scores and whatnot. That is really important in this space as well. And so sometimes that pop-up does lead to a full-time, and they say, you did great, can you just stay? And so,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's obviously easier for them if somebody did really well and they can leave them in place. But
yeah.
we'll talk about some of those metrics later that you kind of need to stay on top of. Before we get to metrics, though, let's talk expenses. So, what are the biggest expenses on the Amazon side that you need to be prepared for?
Yeah. Obviously, payroll. Payroll is the largest expense. It takes up 60 to 70% of your revenue. It goes to payroll typically. And one thing that people underestimate is early on, it's going to lag your revenue. So you need to hire and train a dozen, 2 dozen people and have them ready and paying them during that before you run a single route. And so that's where that extra capital that you have available comes in. And then on the so that's the payroll side and being able to train and have that ready, and then on the other expenses is your fleet that makes up the vast majority of the rest of your expenses, the cost of your vehicles for renting them, especially early on if you don't have the leases available, the deposits on those vehicles. Usually it's the first month's rent of the rental cost is the deposit amount, or at least 50% of it, and deposits on your insurance. So you have to bind your insurance, auto insurance and workers' comp specifically, and so usually you need to pay the first month up front. And that is one cost that can creep up a lot. You'll get a rate for your insurance very early on, like when you're first launching and you're much smaller, you have a smaller fleet. But then as your fleet grows, suddenly you get renewed in usually 6 months to a year, and it goes up quite a bit. You kind of like get out of that like early stage rate, and so finding the right partner there as well to like work with you and scale with you is important as well.
Okay, we touched on insurance, so let's talk
Yeah.
about it more. I know that's one of the biggest concerns people have, especially, let's say they came from the FedEx world where they're not used to dealing with liability insurance, and you hear the stories of Amazon having really high insurance costs. It's just a big brand name out on the road with a bunch of trucks. The liability insurance, I know, is expensive and continues to balloon. So what are strategies that you've seen where people can control that expense and be successful there?
Yeah, it does come down to best practices in terms of safety and really pushing safety. Amazon has what's called a scorecard, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit as well. But they rate you on safety and quality. If you are acting within those safety metrics, generally speaking, then you shouldn't have too many incidents that are requiring, you know, a claim ultimately. And so that's really important, just building that culture of safety very early on. And I know sometimes it sounds cliche, but it really is true. And it's better for the drivers, their well-being, as well as for your business, and you profit from being safe. So it's one interesting piece of it. There's hard dollar costs associated with meeting safety metrics. So just like limiting the number of issues would be one, and training the right way and whatnot. And then also working, whoever you're working with in terms of a broker, like making sure you're getting guidance and leaning on expertise there to understand what claims should I be putting through, what should I not be. I think a lot of the premium hikes that we've seen over the last couple of years, which they have been significant, that's been a big topic of conversation, 50, 60, 70% increases for DSPs that have been around for 3 years, is controlling what you're actually putting through insurance early is important. A lot of those DSPs were just taking everything and just saying, oh, I have insurance, I'll just put it through. But it's mostly, it's just lack of understanding of how insurance works, that these claims that you're submitting now are going to cost you six figures in 2 years and 3 years when everything renews. So
Yeah, so people not paying attention to the fact that those claims they send through really affect the rates, and I do think that what you said is really important. You need to have somebody who, when you have questions about this, if you call them, they'll give you good advice about how to actually manage your claims and the right decisions to make. Because yeah, it is simple to see that, okay, this is an expense that insurances cover, but not think about the multiplicative effects that happen over time. I guess, so those are strategies that we've seen people do. Do we think there's any chance, like Amazon seeing any of that and are saying maybe there's something we tweak in how we pay DSPs, or is that, you think that's just not something they're worried about covering for people?
I have heard mixed reviews about that. There are some people that say, I met with somebody and they said Amazon has done their business reviews and they think the average DSP is profitable enough where we're not going to make this adjustment, and DSPs are taking a hit. But then some of our DSP partners, and some of this is station specific and region specific, they're getting adjustments to their rate card to increase their fixed monthly payment, and they're citing insurance costs as the primary factor in that. But it doesn't seem like that's a broad across the board change. They're doing that very regionally. So it might be just the right DSP groups barking up the right tree, or
Yeah.
or so forth, but as a general program change, we're not hearing anything that they're going to significantly increase how much they're paying you for your
Yeah,
fleet.
we haven't seen Amazon come out and say everybody gets a 5% increase, but at least there's some positive indications that in certain areas people are getting some movement and specifically pointing to insurance.
Yeah, and I will add too, so they just changed their repairs and maintenance program as well last year. And so that's also one of the reasons why they're citing that they're not going to increase their payment, is they are covering a lot of the preventative maintenance now, or they've always covered most of the preventative maintenance, but even non-preventative damages and whatnot, they are covering that. And then they've established what's called a fleet improvement fund, where every DSP gets allocated anywhere from 20 to 40 or $50,000 that they can use in a calendar year, and it can be used for anything. So you damage a van, you bang up the door, anything that goes into servicing the fleet, you can use towards that, and it's you use it or lose it. So if you're given $40,000, we advise that all of our clients use it to the max. There's no penalty for using it all, and in fact, you might actually get penalized if you don't use it, because then it is saying to whoever's determining how much, well, they didn't need all that, so I'm actually going to lower it next year. So that is a big change that happened, and so they are moving the needle in certain areas, and I think a lot of the algorithmic changes they very much work in like algorithms and whatnot. They'll tweak this here, but then this area starts to falter, and so they are pretty good about changing. Like I wouldn't say that they're too set in stone with like not making improvements that do help the DSP. That's like one thing that I think is a little bit misunderstood is Amazon's just out to get the DSP, but they're really not. They do make changes that benefit. Yeah.
Are there any other expenses that you see in the first, 6 months to a year that people don't expect that are kind of surprise expenses to be aware of when you're starting up and getting into this?
Yeah, that increase in insurance that might just trigger in that 6 months. That suddenly you're paying a lot more in premiums because you're off of your intro rate with Marsh or whoever, and then some other expenses is really like the large repairs that come in and that you need to make. And then also I would almost say the opportunity costs are the biggest ones that you miss out on, because as you ramp, you might start to see some other DSPs. A lot of the DSPs launching today are at new stations, so they're launching 3 or 4 DSPs in the same station because they're building out more terminals everywhere. You see your other competitor, they're essentially competitors in your station, getting more volume, and it's because you weren't able to meet your route commitments early. So like the ability to scale, but again, that goes back to having enough capital to be able to hire more people than you need and get more vehicles than you need, knowing that that volume is coming and you can kind of snag it when it's there. Or another DSP isn't meeting theirs and now somebody else needs to grab it, so you do. You know,
Okay, so that's the expense side. Let's talk a little bit more about how Amazon actually pays in the scorecard. So, can you talk about the main kind of revenue pieces and also, I guess, get into the scorecard as it makes sense?
yeah. So Amazon pays you for every route that you run and every package that you deliver, and they pay your routes based on a budgeted number of hours. So it they're going to allot 10 hours generally for your route, and so your 10-hour route is your block of hours, and then that route is paid based on an hourly rate. So maybe it's $31 or $32 an hour. They'll pay you $320 for that route that day, and so that's the primary driver for the weekly. And then they pay you 10 cents per package. Starting this year, that has gone up to 12 cents per package. So they're increasing that to about 20%, with up to 12. So that's generally how the weekly servicing gets paid. So a little bit different than FedEx with the stops. But it's not really stop dependent. It's just you get a block of hours, and then you get paid for your fleet every month. So if you have 30 routes, generally they'll pay you for 30 vehicles, and they look to see if you have the number of leases to support that, and if not, they'll approve you for rentals, and then those rentals will get paid at a rental rate. And then you have the scorecard. So that's the big thing that everybody talks about. Get your scorecard. So there's tiers to getting your scorecard essentially. And what your scorecard is they're measuring you on safety and quality. On the quality side, it's things like customer delivery feedback. Is the driver following those notes that someone put in the Amazon app to say, please deliver to the back door? Are they actually following that, or are they getting dinged on that? Successful deliveries, so you dispatched with 10,000 packages. You came back with 10 packages. That affects your delivery score. And then on the safety side, it's things like seatbelt off rate, speeding violations. They have every single vehicle is required to have what's called Netrodyne cameras inside the vehicles, and you do get penalized if one of those breaks and you send a van out on the road. So like maintaining those is also important. But it's measuring distraction rates for drivers. It's measuring whether they're rolling through a stop sign or not, and it dings them every time something like that happens. And so why that's beneficial is if you get over a certain metric, which is, they score you based on like a 0 to 100 scale. Anything over 85, you get Fantastic Plus. That's an extra 15 cents per package. Generally, that could be as much as $12,000 or $15,000 a week. So it's significant. And we do see that getting that fantastic and then fantastic, which is one tier below, which was about 75 to 85. That is 7 cents per package. So still, it's less than half, but you're still getting an extra $5,000 or $4,000 for that week. And we do see a direct correlation for that with the profitability. I mean, naturally you would. I'm not saying that it's the total amount of the profitability. Some DSPs that, that is the case, unfortunately. But there's other areas of opportunity they probably have. But in
Yeah,
any
because
case,
that's what I've heard a lot is, Amazon pays to cover all of your expenses. You got to be in the top one or two tiers to make a lot of profitability. So you say some cases that's true, some cases it's not. But regardless, if you can be in those top two tiers, you're significantly impacting your profitability.
oh yeah, yeah. And so we can talk about it more related to the payroll costs, but all of your incentives for your managers and drivers should really be centered around that because it has so many downstream impacts, and you're going to make so much more, and you also have more to give as well. And so, aligning incentives, the incentive is for you to get that, so everybody else's should be as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it there. So, what types of incentives? How does that work? And how do you? We can start there too. Like, what does payroll typically look like? Is it hourly? Is it day rates? Like, what are people doing, and how do you incentivize that scorecard behavior from it?
Yeah, it's all hourly. So every driver has to be W-2 hourly employee, and if you're 40 hours of 40 hours a week, and then anything over that's overtime, a time and a half, and then unless you're in some states that have that after 8 hours, and so Amazon does build that into the rate card though and so your payroll is going to be your hourly payroll, and then every driver, any hour that they take more than that 10 hours you were allotted for your route, you're working for free at that point. You're paying the driver. Amazon does not care that it took you 11 hours to complete that route. That 1 hour that you paid your driver is uncompensated by Amazon. So really monitoring your labor hours within that allotted hours that every route is given is really important. And some of the most successful DSPs keep that on a daily record and try to keep their average hours on the road down below that number. Because a lot of times they won't even go into overtime. So like a lot of people track their overtime rate early, and that's like, oh, I'm running 2% overtime or 3% overtime, and that's healthy for me. But they're not seeing the drivers that only work 2 shifts that spent 26 hours on the road, and that extra 6 hours essentially cut out your profitability like at that amount. And so we see that a lot where people aren't doing that, and so that's really important that you do.
Hey guys, we just wanted to pause for a moment to invite you to our free events that are happening throughout the year. Whether you're just getting started in the logistics industry or you're looking to optimize your current operation, Route Consultant has events that are designed specifically for you. So head on over to routeconsultant.com/events or check out our show notes to register for free today. Also, while you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Industry Insights with Route Consultant podcast so that you don't miss out on the stories, the advice, and the updates that are happening throughout the industry. We appreciate you being here and hope to meet you in person soon. Now let's get back to the episode.
And then a lot of people will tie some sort of incentive score. So along with your scorecard, every driver gets their own score as well. That's fantastic or less than that. So a lot of DSPs will say, if we as a company get Fantastic Plus, every driver will get an extra $50 this week. But the driver, you driver, need to have worked a certain number of shifts and also gotten fantastic on your score. So it's not like giving, bad, congratulating bad behavior by some people that just so happen the company achieved it. So there's a lot of that. And then also incentivizing management around those same metrics. So that operations manager that I talked about earlier that you hire and your dispatchers that you need to have, if they're incentivized that, hey, if your labor hours come within our budgeted hours, you will get a $100 bonus. I've seen it where if the labor hours are exceeding your budgeted hours by as little as 5%, that's 6 figures by the end of the year. It's very, very significant because it's every single day. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is one of the things I think you kind of highlighted it earlier, but when we think about Amazon, people are scared about working with them, but they have so much data that they provide and a lot of technology that does actually make your decision making, a lot more effective when you can see, here are the good drivers, here are the exact things I need to compensate for, and I can pay incentives around it. So I think that's a really good point. Another of the things that you just brought up, layer-wise, so you have an operations manager, and you mentioned dispatcher. So what are the different types of people a standard DSP brings into their organization beyond just drivers?
Yeah, so you have that operation manager, like we talked about, someone who's a direct point of contact for the station, and they're really the leader on the team. And oftentimes we will see dispatchers. Now, really effective DSPs can take a driver and they kind of flex drivers into dispatchers. So maybe a high performing driver that always finishes their routes within 7 hours or 8 hours and does it safely and whatnot. They'll give them the afternoon, the evening shift to be a dispatcher for the late night dispatch or whatnot, and or maybe you know, you can be creative, but you do need a dispatch function. You can't really operate without one, and so that's a primary part of the team. And then from time to time, you do see people. It depends. You might have a fleet manager that's on site that's doing repairs on site and whatnot, or people outsource that as well. And then most people have some sort of hiring arm of the business. You do need a hiring and recruiting arm of the business and an HR arm of the business for sure. Whether you use a consultant or you hire somebody internally, it all depends on what your strategy is and what you're able to pay for as well. And so, yeah, that's generally like the management team that's required.
So you just touched on a late night dispatch. So Worlds of FedEx and Bread, they dispatch in the morning once. So how is that different with Amazon?
Yeah, so there's oftentimes several waves that happen throughout the day. So you might have 3 different waves that you're sending drivers out throughout the day. So the drivers that started at 8 a.m. are getting back by hopefully 5 p.m. And then there's a wave that went out at noon that isn't getting back till 8 o'clock at night. And you do need dispatchers monitoring them because Amazon in their system, you could see where every driver is on the road, and it even tells you if they're behind based on what the algorithm says, and they're going to be 2 hours late tonight. And so you need somebody managing it to say, hey, this driver over here is going to be finishing up early. Can you go what's called rescue this other driver? And they do what's called rescues. And then you might incentivize that driver with some extra dollars, like a rescue bonus for helping somebody else out to try to get those labor hours down, because you don't want somebody out there too late and not completing their routes, and also driving around when it's too dark out and so forth. So that also affects your safety. So yeah, you do need a dispatch function monitoring the drivers on the road, like especially at dispatch early and then at the end of the day as well, getting everybody back.
So you might not have all of your drivers always out at the same time, but there may be more hours, significantly more hours from a total hours in the day that you do have drivers out on the road than what you may see with FedEx or Bread. So I think that's an important reality. And so with that, you have dispatchers, but what does it look like as an owner from a day-to-day perspective? How often are people driving? What are they monitoring throughout the day to stay on top of as an owner?
Yeah. It really does depend on how much you want to be included in the weeds. I recommend that you do really lean on management and like build a team around you, and because you will get burnt out. We see it all the time, and so the day to day of a owner operator is we don't typically see them driving. Like typically, I don't see that too often, but it does happen. I mean, you can't staff up, but the good operators have a bench of drivers as well that they can call on and flex in if somebody calls out last minute and they need to meet a route commitment. Also using your dispatchers and whatnot to drive. But yeah, really measuring. I think the most important thing that an owner should be doing is really like measuring the numbers of the business, looking at those labor hours at the end of the day and making corrections. Performance management's very important, and doing that coaching and like coaching bad drivers out and keeping the good drivers happy, and really always keeping track of that. And then also the station management relationship is very important. I mean, we work with DSPs who are in the station every day. We work with DSPs who are 3 states away from their DSP, but anyone who's successful has that good relationship that they can call that manager at that station and be able to speak to them, have a phone call conversation with them, and show face and so forth. So that showing face and relationship is very important as the owner as well. And yeah, that's like the typical day to day. But there are DSP owners that are going in and fixing that light bulb and like really getting their hands in the weeds. But really, I think it's important that you kind of stay separated a little bit so that you can manage the business and not be too in the weeds.
Yeah. So with that, we talked about how many, the scorecard and all the operational metrics that Amazon gives you. Do you find that the best operators exclusively stick to that, or Are they balancing that with their own internal KPIs to manage safety and profitability? Like, is that a give and take that you have to balance? Is it just meeting Amazon's criteria, or do you have to use your own kind of internal KPIs to balance against?
You do need your own internal KPIs to balance against. The majority of it, if you stay within those scorecard metrics, it's going to benefit you. It really will. The one thing I keep going back to it because I see it so often where people don't know where their money's going is those labor hours. Like really monitoring that. Nobody's required to do that. There are labor hour compliance rules that Amazon requires you to stay within. Like somebody can't work 7 days in a row, things like that. But monitoring it so that people are getting, that your labor hours are controlled is very important. That's something that people do. The other thing that I really do recommend most DSPs to do is set up a rolling cash forecast. So cash flow is a funny thing in this space because whenever you're ramping, your costs are going to come in before any revenue. Your revenue is going to lag. So you might say you're running 30 routes in July. You know that by September you need to be running 45. You're going to have payroll costs and all that same cost that we talked about on startup. You're going to be incurring those. So having even a rudimentary just cash forecast. This is about how much revenue I'm going to come in next week over the next 13 weeks. This is about how much my payroll should be running based on the number of drivers I have. This is the known fleet cost that I have, and just maintaining that to be able to foresee, because I do see that sometimes where things have been tight for a few weeks and people get very nervous, like, why did I lose money? My bank account went down over the last couple of weeks, but it's because revenue is coming. It's lagging your expenses. So that's something that I think is really important to do, is just measuring like that forecast, at least for 3 months out at a time.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I see it all the time, not just Amazon, but in a lot of industries where people just look at their bank accounts and you can miss out on some of the trends that are affecting you and things that are lagging. I think it's a great point.
Yeah.
What does stabilized average kind of profitability look like for a DSP?
Yeah, a stabilized average profitability is about 8 to 12%. And that's honestly oftentimes after the owner is taking a salary. So if you add that back, a good profitable DSP could be between 12 and 15% before you may be paying yourself. So that's what I would.
And when you're saying in that range, are those people that are typically, fantastic or fantastic plus to be kind of in that range, or is.
Yeah, more often than not, they would be. Yeah, yeah. And if you're consistently Fantastic Plus, you probably are exceeding 15%. If you were to not be getting Fantastic and Fantastic Plus at least consistently, or 75% of the year, you probably would see it closer to like that 5%, 3 to 5%.
And do you have a sense of kind of what average revenue looks like for an average size DSP? I know that can vary a lot.
Yeah, sure. It's about $3 to $5 million in revenue. So
I think that alone, the average Amazon DSP is significantly larger than the average FedEx contractor. Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to understand. The number of routes that you run in this business, the number of employees you have and trucks that are on the road, even if it's not spread out across the country, is often significantly larger in the Amazon space as opposed to FedEx. And that does, so your margins, they are what they are, but it's a significantly larger pie than the average FedEx contract.
Absolutely, yeah. And DSPs will easily get to 120 employees in a given year, at any point. And so that's pretty average, Probably the average is closer to like 80, but still that's, to your point, a lot larger than the average on the FedEx side.
So I'll open it up for questions in just a second, but one of the things that I want to ask about is, in general, when you think about the biggest pitfalls, the biggest challenges that you see people run into in the first year, is anything other than what we've talked about already? Like, when you see people who come in and struggle or even potentially fail, like, what are usually the big reasons why?
They didn't train their team well enough and delegate enough to other people. Like I said, I think I did mention that, but that's the biggest pitfall, because you're easily going to get burnt out. You can do everything and manage the whole business without help with up to like 15 routes, 20 routes. You could probably make it work, but it is a 7-day-a-week operation, oftentimes 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day. So some of the most burnt out operators are there every single day, 7 days a week, and they haven't put in those systems, because very quickly you will be asked to scale and pick up more opportunities. So yes, I'm able to do it at 15 routes, but when you get the call and you're able to now have to go up to 45, you need that team already. You can't wait till then to start establishing that, because it's going to take them 3 to 6 months to be effective. So putting that in place early will enable the scale in the future and be able now allow you to be able to grow and also meet all the requirements as you grow.
And then I guess just as a, what are we seeing in the Amazon's DSP space right now? Like, are there anything big coming, or what's kind of the general outlook right now?
Yeah, it is very optimistic right now, I will say, because people may be aware, but they had a contract with UPS that expired last year, and so they had essentially a non-compete for UPS's business to ship for them. Now they've launched Ship with Amazon. They are building out a $6 billion investment in terminals around the country to to enable delivery for third parties. So very soon, and in some markets already, when you go to ship something off of any sort of website or with through Walmart or whatever it might be, you could ship with Amazon at that point. So that's going to shift the whole mindset around the program and how Amazon sees the program. Today, it's a cost center for them. Going forward, it's going to become a profit center for them, and they're going to have their own customers that they're going to be wanting to meet metrics for, not just everybody at their homes. It's going to be box stores, it's going to be grocery stores, whatever it might be. So that's going to, I think, change the mindset of even the people running the program as well. I think there's going to be more investment in the DSPs and be more willing to dish out investment because it's not just a cost center anymore. And that's going to be a change over the next few years that I think is going to really impact the space and grow it quite a bit.
Yeah, and you're almost downplaying how huge of a shift that is in terms of just the way that Amazon has looked at this space. And, we've always seen when Amazon came to the space how big of a player they are. And it's like, well, this is just a way for them to enable what they're already doing. And that's kind of what, a way to ship what they're already doing. But as they continue to expand and say, we're investing a ton of money into offering these services to third parties, it really, they're $1 trillion gorilla that have been here, and they can throw whatever money they want into this to be really successful and to grow as much as they want. So it's one of those things I've always told people is you should be paying attention to Amazon if you can get in, even if you're not, if you're FedEx or if you're somewhere else. Like, this is something you should be considering and adding on to your portfolio because they're not going anywhere. They're doubling down right now, especially. So I think that's a really important point to highlight for people.
Yeah, yeah. And their technology, right?
Yes.
You could see where your driver is on the road,
Yeah.
like companies would pay a lot of money for that.
That's right. Yeah. So Amazon has internally built a lot of the things where you have to use external vendors in other industries and just provide it to other people.
Yeah.
So we've got a few minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? I'll start here. First hand I saw. He's coming from your left.
Hi. So I'm kind of interested on beginner buyer, but what does the relationship between a DSP and an AMZL look like as an owner?
Yeah, so it's usually positive. I mean, so you're going to have relationships established with your station management.
And real quick, what is an AMZL?
Oh, an AMZL is the DSP program, right? Yeah, so that is you will have relationships with higher ups as well, through the interview process and whatnot. But you're really communicating with station management and a lot of the people working within your station more often than not. You also are assigned a business coach. So Amazon has a business coach program where they are consultants essentially, that they are your liaison with Amazon corporately. And so that's a really important relationship to foster as well, because they can kind of get you information faster. If there's something that's going wrong, they can put you in the right place to talk to the right person and so forth. But that's the primary relationships that you have with Amazon.
Do you own territory, or do you work out of a terminal and they'll send you wherever? One of the advantages in FedEx land is you get familiarity with an area. You know which routes are bad and which routes are good, where you can make money, where you can. Is that similar in Amazon land? And also, do they pay you for an extra truck or two in case one goes down?
Great questions. So it's not built the same way that FedEx is, where you have a dedicated service area. All the DSPs in the area essentially service one region or like a radius around that station. Now, the same DSPs oftentimes will service the same areas just based on the way Amazon did it, but you don't own a contracted service area. They can change that on you. And we've seen it before where a DSP suddenly was doing, in New York, they were going out to New Jersey and doing more like suburban, and suddenly now they're delivering in Staten Island or Queens. They could change that on you. And so you don't necessarily own a contract the same way that you do in the FedEx world. And then Great question on the rental if you have a van that goes down. That is a change that happened recently where if you have a vehicle that goes down and that it's deemed preventable, when you have to go replace it for however long it's down, they are not paying you for that extra vehicle if it was deemed preventable. So that's a significant cost. So that goes back to finding the right vendors that will, get your van back on the road faster, because every day that you don't, you are incurring costs that are not getting replaced. And so, but there are mechanisms for you to get vans approved. If you do have vans that go down, they have what's called an approved fleet size. As long as you can get the right documentation that it wasn't preventable, that you need this rental in order to meet your route commitments, and there's certain compliance things that you need to stay maintaining in the portal related to your fleet, you can get approved for that, and then they will cover the cost of the rental. It all kind of depends on the nature of why the van went down and whether you're providing the right documentation.
Related to that a little bit, so if you're in an urban area and they shifted your territory, we're delivering to some rural stuff, would that change the types of vehicles that you may need? And would Amazon change those vehicles for you? What would that look like?
It could. Not generally, we don't really see that, but sometimes, you're using the same types of vehicles for the different areas. It usually isn't that extreme of a change. So yeah.
Hi. You said when on the bench, when you get a call, you have to be ready, drop everything, and go and take it up, right? What does that mean? That means you have to leave your job, or if you have another business, leave everything and take it up?
In essence, yeah, like they give you a timeline to accept the job essentially, or the DSP. So you can't. It's not going to be 3 months or 4 months to make a decision. They want a decision from you in the next few weeks. You probably don't have to. If you're working a W-2 job, you probably don't have to leave that job right then and there. But you do need to start making plans to probably leave it. And then if you have other businesses, you can continue to operate those, and it just forces your hand to go find help faster and to be able to stand it up. But early on, it is a pretty big commitment to go to the training classes that they have and so forth, go to the station, meet people, that sort of stuff.
And do you ever see first-time operators let them operate? It's me.
Oh yeah. I was like,
His mouth's not moving. Do you ever see them allow first-time operators to operate remotely?
yeah. They do. There's plenty of DSP owners that live 8 hours away from their station and whatnot. It's not prescribed that way. They really want the owner operator, and so even for those that do live remotely or across state lines, that you do have to make an effort to still show that you're very involved in the business. Join the calls, know that you have your ear to the ground, and so they allow it. It's not a hard fast rule, but it is frowned upon if you're completely absentee.
Yeah, I'm waiting on an interview with Amazon. Back in November, I made it so far up to where I'm already approved. So they tell you to pick 3 desired locations, and so I picked those. And really, there's not many locations at all right now. Hopefully, that'll improve with what you're talking about with their investment into it. But if I were to pick up a FedEx business during the meantime, would that help or hurt my chances of getting approved as a DSP?
I don't know that it will have a significant impact either way. I don't know that they're necessarily looking at that. So,
Okay.
In terms of getting approved to be a DSP, so.
Okay. Interestingly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think FedEx, a lot of times they're looking more at operationally, do you know the logistics business, and can you answer those questions? But Amazon cares a lot more about you as a person. Am I wrong there?
Yeah, like your management capabilities, your leadership capabilities. They're really looking at that more so.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily that oh, you run FedEx, so we think you'll be better. They're still kind of evaluating you as a person and your leadership skills.
What are the typical contract term lengths for
Yeah.
DSP?
Yeah, great question. It's a 1 year at a time. Sometimes you can get approved for 2 years, but it is a 1 year contract every year, and so.
Do you negotiate it?
No negotiation. You're given your rates. There's nothing really you can negotiate on. He says the same as FedEx. Yeah.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Some of the frustrations I've heard about Amazon DSP owners were one day Amazon will tell you, hey, you have 15 routes on Tuesday, but then the next day they're like, you have 20 routes. You have to come up with the staffing and you have to come up with the vans. Is that still occurring frequently? Do you see? But it seems like a lot of the DSP owners, they got out early on because of those issues.
You do see that sometimes, but it's usually not a requirement like within like next day suddenly they're saying now you need to do 20. They usually give you some notice, but it's only maybe a week or so. So that could happen.
So as far as personnel, do you see yourself hiring a lot more part-time personnel than full-time and incentivizing them to come in to work short notice?
Yes, yeah, that's right. You basically have a bench of drivers that you can call on, and you have more people on staff than you need, and you keep a pipeline. So a lot of DSPs deploy what's called pipeline recruiting, where they're just always recruiting year round. So they're constantly interviewing. And then they know that they like someone. I'll call you when we're ready, essentially. But that does pose some risks, of course, as well.
So do you see DSP owners fighting over personnel in the same station a lot?
Sometimes, you do see drivers who worked at this DSP and now they're over here at this DSP, and so there is some level of competition for drivers in that sense. Depends on the market, of course.
What's the hourly rate of a driver right now?
On average, it's about $20 an hour across the country.
Thank you.
Yep. Who's next?
Oh,
Okay, quick question. So, as a percentage of revenue, what should your target be for your salary for your employees?
Like as a total?
Yeah, as a total.
Yeah. So what I like to do is I compare the driver payroll compared to your weekly route revenue, because you get a big chunk of money every month that goes to your fleet. I like to disregard that because that should be covering your fleet related expenses. So as a percentage of your weekly route revenue, it's about 70 to 75%.
Good morning. My name is Wanda Curry from the Columbus, Ohio area. And I have a question about the process of getting approved as a DPS. You might have covered it. I came in a little bit late, so I don't know if you covered it at the beginning, but if you could share that. And then secondly, out of 10 candidates, what would you say is the average amount you guys approve to become a DPS? Like how structured is it?
Yeah. Well, so the process is that you go through several rounds of interviews, you apply and so forth, and then you after those interviews you get approved and you get put on what's called a bench, and the bench is essentially a waiting list to become a DSP. And somebody else mentioned earlier that you do kind of select where your preferred locations are, but sometimes there are opportunities that pop up that are not in those preferred locations, and they're just trying to fill it. And so if you're willing to relocate, you might get the opportunity faster. But if you're not willing to relocate, you might sit for a little bit longer because they're not investing in that area. And then in terms of the number of people that get approved, I actually don't know that number. I don't work for Amazon, so it's not something like I'm necessarily privy to. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly like what percentage of people get approved and who don't.
The approval process is a lot harder if you're buying an existing business. I'll say that for sure. Amazon's more selective if you're buying an existing one as opposed to applying to be on the bench. Because in the situations where you're taking over an existing one, there's a higher expectation that you're able to come in and immediately be able to service whatever size that territory is. No, so it would be two different interviews. So what we're talking about here, the bench is the standard process for getting into the DSP program, where you're essentially going to Amazon and interviewing to be, you choose a few selections and you're saying, these are the top areas I'd like to be in. If you have those, and Amazon may give you one of those, or they may say, those are nice, but we have a need here. And if you accept that, you may get off the bench faster. What I was talking about is if you were buying an existing business, that means you're essentially, Amazon's evaluating you to come in and take over that territory. And those are typically a little bit more exciting interview processes than just being the typical application for the bench. Yeah.
Does that mean then that for DSPs who are trying to sell their business, it's then probably not as profitable because it's going to be harder to find someone to take over. Does Amazon prefer that you sell it back to them? And how does that work?
Yeah. So I guess the first way to answer that. So what would Amazon do if you were just to say, I want to walk away? Like, what's their process there?
Yeah, I mean, you can just not renew your own contract, and you can just walk away and say, I'm shutting down. And there's usually like about a month-long process where you have to then return vehicles. And so that is the process for shutting down. If you were not going to sell it, you just kind of close your doors and and to let your employees know and so forth. And so that is the one path. And then
Would Amazon allow you to like sell it to your manager or have your manager take over the operations?
You know, we are starting to see that now that the DSP program has matured, where there are owners that want to start stepping away and doing other things, and they've had this manager that's been working for them for years, and so they do, in some cases at least, offer some equity stake in it. Now that's also a bit frowned upon by Amazon. They don't want multi-owner. They don't want a company that has 40 owners coming in and buying a DSP. They don't allow for that. They want that owner operator, but they do offer what's called the Path to Ownership program for drivers, where it's an actual program where a company nominates an employee of theirs to go through a training program, and then the end result of that, if approved, the driver is given a DSP themselves. And we actually see a lot of the new DSPs standing up are from Road to Ownership program, and so I think that they do like if you are going to leave, to hand it off to somebody who's been in the business already, and it seems to be their posture with the things like the Road to Ownership. Right. That's a great question. And that's probably something that you have to answer a lot too.
Yeah,
But
if you want to have that real conversation, Luke's actually the guy he's at the back of the room on our team who does that all the time. He doesn't. I'm not going to make him put on the mic right now, but it's you're essentially selling the rights to the business and the people as well. That is like you've got 60, 120 employees. That's not a trivial thing, but it's also, we talked about it before. One of the hardest things about Amazon is, how do I get into the business in a place that I want to be in? Like, if you're trying to get into Atlanta, there may never be a bench opportunity that comes there. And so part of it is just the ability to choose where you start and want to be not in rural North Dakota. So that's part of what you're buying, is the access to a certain area that you wouldn't have been able to have access to otherwise. One more, probably. Yeah, I'd say this is the last question, time-wise, so that I don't get yelled at.
You said that usually it's just 1 year contract, correct? And it has to renew. How often or not do those contracts extend to like the next year to people? I mean, have you ever seen, they start 1 year and then Amazon's like, we're done with you? I mean, how often does that happen?
yeah, that's a great question, and it does happen. Not going to sugarcoat that. That does happen, where Amazon says, we're not going to renew your contract. Sorry, you got to shut down in 30 days or 15 days or whatever it might be. More often than not, the people that happens to have consistent compliance issues, constantly not meeting, work hour compliance issues. They're editing their employees' time cards. They're not doing things that are within the legal bounds and also within the Amazon compliance bounds. They're not meeting their route targets. So that's more often than not what we see. And I would say it's hard for me to really pinpoint a percentage of DSPs that happened to. I would probably put it on 5%, 5% of the network that's happened to over the past 4 years, 5 years, where it's just non-renewal. More often than not, we'll see a DSP leave on their own accord than having their contract canceled overnight by Amazon. Not too often, no. Sometimes that has happened though with some terminals that they just thought that was going to have more than what it was going to have. Oftentimes they give them an opportunity to relocate though before they'll just say you're done. And then most recently, because you might hear in the grapevine, they did used to have what's called a 1.0 program before 2018, where it was closer to a FedEx model in a way where one DSP would operate out of 4 terminals all within a region, all over Florida. And there was a much larger operation. And we've worked with, a few of them where it was, 300, 400 employees across all these terminals. They did sunset that program recently, and so those DSPs were forced to downsize to one location, and a lot of them just decided to say, well, it's not worth the squeeze anymore at this point. So that is one thing that happened recently.
All right. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Andrew, for answering all of my questions and everyone else's. And again, everyone, thank you for coming to the first session on a Friday morning and being here at 9 o'clock. And hopefully you guys have a great rest of the day. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.